social networking, social media networking. She's a great promoter. She came from Massachusetts.
So, shared once.
All right. Anyway, thank you for coming. This is William Horden, who's our great friend and author of many wonderful books. And it's been about, what, 4 years since he's actually spoken to anyone. And he didn't want to talk to anybody. And I said, well, I think it's about time that, you just let other people who've never heard you before at least say what you're doing, because many people have found it very valuable and important. So somehow I conned him into it, and actually I'm sure that whatever he has to say will be very wise. So anyway, there's water, there's hot water for tea, there's popcorn and cookies, and enjoy yourself, and welcome to Wisdom's Goldenrod if you haven't been here before. And I'm Amy, by the way.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, that's it. So the original topic of this was going to be divining your life in the zombie apocalypse. Because we just seem to be in the midst of a time where people seem to be sleepwalking. They seem to be in a trance. They just keep doing strange things and self-destructive things. As if we were in a kind of an ocean of mean-spiritedness. And yet we have islands of beauty and harmony and love and community. And, so how do we navigate that, I think, is kind of been the question. I do, because I do work with the I Ching, I do a lot of readings for people, and that seems to be the main question that comes up over and over again. How do I find my path through this time of unprecedented change? And of course, the pandemic didn't help anything in that regard. So change is one thing, but unprecedented change, just weird change that we're not used to at all, is a little tougher to come up with a plan. My training is not very involved with planning. My training, first of all, was with a Taoist priest and I Ching master, and then later with a Tarahumara shaman. We lived in the Copper Canyon of Mexico for 2 years, and a profound experience. Studying Taoism from ancient China was interesting because you learn about the way of harmony and balance with nature, your fellow humans, and with spirit. You think, good, that's something worth studying. And then go and live with the Tarahumara Indians, who still are semi-nomadic, moving up and down the canyons with the seasons, living in caves. And you see, these people didn't need to develop a philosophy, they just live it without thought. And I find after 40 years, that still is sinking into my cells. I still find that more relevant to me every year. So I've talked about me enough, so now you talk about me. To divine, with the I Ching, for example, we're asking spirit questions, and then we receive these relevant answers, and then we wonder, how is it that that happens? How is this oracle that has had a relationship with human beings for 4,000 years? How does it answer us in a meaningful way? So the tendency is to think, oh, well, it's telling us about the future. And as a rule, nothing could be farther from the truth. And so if we think about a water diviner, a water witch, as they call them, right? They have the sticks, and they go around and they find water that way. They're not looking for future water. They're looking for what's hidden under the surface. And that's what we mean by to divine. We mean, what is it that's hidden from the five senses? The oldest worldview in the world, you can't even call it a religion exactly, it's just a way of life, is called animism. And that is the direct perception that nature is spirit, that everything has a soul, in the sense that the soul is like an individual part of spirit. And so, that's why you heard the herbalists go out and they ask the plant for permission before they cut a leaf, or before the masons would go out into the mountains, and they would ask the mountain for permission before they would take a stone. My teacher would say, if you love the world, it will love you back. Because he was saying, if you are pouring out that adoration to your surroundings, the world meaning both spirit and nature, that it recognizes you, that it's that personal. These aren't abstractions, you know, these are like lived experiences that people have had for hundreds of generations. In Japan, there's a philosopher who coined the word topophilia, by which he meant that the place creates the culture. It actually creates the people when they live with the land and the spirit of the land, when they live in nature with the spirit of nature. And then what happens is a kind of reversal. You start to feel things that way, and then you go, oh, well, the spirit of nature is the same as the spirit inside of me. I mean, it seems self-evident, you know, when you say it, but you think to actually make that conscious and to bring it out of the head and into the heart, into the cells of the body. You know, a fish is conceived in the ocean, and then it's an egg in the ocean, and then it lives in the ocean, and it eats in the ocean, and it brings about new young in the ocean, and then it dies in the ocean, and it decomposes in the ocean, and then other things eat it in the ocean, and then it's just ocean again. It was always ocean. And so this is what the ancients, out from the Paleolithic times, built into this system called the I Ching, for example. And it isn't that the I Ching is the only thing, and it's important to say that there are numerous means of divination in the world and communication with spirit. And so it's just that that's the one that I'm familiar with and that I will attempt to bore you with here this evening. So, this spirit attempts to be attuned to the spirit that is manifesting all of this stuff. And I love, this is a particularly beautiful scene here with the trees and the wind coming through the trees. But it's just as beautiful to look that way and see the shrine, the altar, that numerous people have made the point that that is spirit also. Just because people make it does not divorce it from spirit. That all of matter is spirit. It was interesting in the pandemic when people stopped doing things for a couple of 6 months, 8 months, a year. All of a sudden the pollution started decreasing substantially. Like immediately. It was beyond people's expectations about how quick things could get just a little bit better just by human beings slowing down what they're doing. So our tendency is to kind of denigrate our own creations. And of course we should be critical of them, but we should also revere the ones that add to nature and that are actually benefiting other people. And remember that those are sacred as well. And so there is that saying, because everything is sacred, so am I. Can people hear me? Doing my best.
There's people in the back.
If I stand, does that help a little?
Yeah.
All right. Will help most things. It's a stone ceremonial instrument, a couple of centuries old, carved out of volcanic stone. Quetzalcoatl, the god of wind. So that's how they would start ceremonies and meetings and gatherings. And then, of course, as Megan knows, because Megan's a lineage holder with me on 4 directions. And then they would, Michael, east is where, please. Point me to east. Thank you. And then they would step to the east, they would look to the east, and they would invoke Quetzalcoatl, the god of divine intelligence. The east wind, they would say. The east wind summons itself. They would turn to the south. And they would invoke Huitzilopochtli, divine will. And they would say the south wind summons itself. And turn west. And say, invoke Tlazolteotl, the divine heart. The west wind summons itself. And turn north. See. Tezcatlipoca they would invoke. The divine memory. The north wind summons itself. And bringing everything to the center. Ritual, old ritual. Not a matter of belief, just a matter of sensing, just a matter of openness, just a matter of presencing, of opening my spirit to the spirit of everything. It's not just the indigenous people of this continent. Pythagoras said that the world is a living, breathing being. Plato said that the wind is the world's breath. And this is an indigenous viewpoint. The ancient Greeks were animists before they started developing a more abstract philosophy. The Spanish were even more relentless than the English in their treatment of people that they found on this continent. Before the Spanish arrived, there were hundreds of thousands of codices. They were called screen folds because they kind of were made in a folding manner like this. And the description is pretty impressive. The piles of those codices that were burned were like mountains. The Spanish collected all of these indigenous original painting books and burned them. And so 10 survived. This is one of them. Of course, this is a facsimile. Of course, you can see here it's burnt. Actually, it was saved from the fire. This is a photographic reproduction of the codex. This is the most important of them. It's called the Borgia Codex. And it was the priest's handbook for how to do rituals and things along that line. And the indigenous people in Mesoamerica never had any contact with the Europeans, and so their art form is a little bit strange to Western eyes. But here you can see an interesting example of a world alive. Things are not just things. Everything is animate. Everything is speaking. Everything. It's okay. Everything has spirit. It's turkey. Numerous of these are animals. And it's a turkey in the right-hand corner, a jaguar down near the way in the left. Speaking, acting as human beings. Maybe better than human beings. These particular pages are devoted to the naming of an individual based on their birth date, which is the priest's job. So my little book is called the Toltec Ching because, and that represents surprise, suddenness, something out of the blue, the unexpected, sometimes shock. So it also represents the ability to act in an unpredictable way, to act in a surprising way. And the opposite of that is wind, which is gradual, slow penetration into things, like the roots of a tree underneath your house. At first it doesn't seem like anything, but in 20 years it picks up the foundation. Wind can come in through the cracks of anything. And so wind is the ability to understand. Wind is patience, it's evolution, and more than anything, it's adaptation. Because we now come back to wind as the breath of the world and how it adapts to everything. Again, these aren't abstractions, these are experiences. So if I might, if you would indulge me, is pick an object for just a moment. Those of you looking out there, pick an object. Those of you here, pick an object. And look at it using your sun sense. Seeing it as the beginning of something. Seeing it as it is in the act of being created. It is brand new. It isn't a thing. It's creative activity right in front of you. And then just holding your sight on that, look at it and see it as joyous. Use your lake sense and see that same thing as joy. As part of a community of being, of communion, with all the other things in its surroundings, with spirit itself. And then the same object, if you would use your fire sense and see it as knowledge, as learning, as something that's teaching you, as an instrument by which you can learn. And the same object with your lightning sense, and see it as a surprising, unexpected, vivid thing, suddenly there, unexpectedly. Almost shocking in its presence, in its suddenness. And with your wind sense, You see it in its adaptation to time, to its environment. How long it has been at work. In your water sense, to see what you're looking at as an unfathomable mystery, something that actually lies beyond your capacity to fathom it. That no matter how used you are to seeing such a thing, you see the mystery that it is opening up in front of you. And you see that it's actually a mirror to your own mysterious nature. And when we're honest with ourselves, we admit that we know less about ourselves than we do about the world. That our portion of the great mystery is expressing itself constantly in ways that surprise us, that are unpredictable. And if you can see the same object with the mountain sense, and that now it's standstill, it's stuck in time, it's unmoving, it's never going to move again. It's calm, it's in harmony with everything around it, and it's a mirror of your own center. It's a mirror of your own solidity, of your own immovable wisdom. And your moon sense. To see this object in its aspect of being perfected, that it is in the midst of its own perfecting activity, that it is fulfilling its ownness, not according to any other thing, not a plan, not an abstraction, not a goal, but its own being fulfilling itself, just as a mirror of you. There. Everything I know. It's been a pleasure. Good night. Oh, wait, I have a magic trick. Wait, watch this. Nothing. Yeah, this. Watch once, because I can't do it twice, because you'll catch on. All right, ready? Ordinary mind. Enlightened mind. It's the same thing. Very well.
Can I ask a question?
The little girl in the back?
If you did, say, like a reading for this very moment of this group, I know you've done that before, like given the craziness of the world right now, how would you do that? How would it work? You know, maybe you don't want to do that.
No, right, because there's a technique, you know, because usually when you do an I Ching reading, right, you have these coins, and you throw coins, and chance affects the outcome of that. So the idea is that spirit can influence that 50-50-ness of the coins, and so you have a reading that way. What Amy's saying is, can you do it in a more conscious way? You know, where you're looking at the situation that you're involved in, and can you then construct what is called a hexagram, a reading in. So even though there's 8 trigrams, there's 64 hexagrams, because this week only 8 times 8 is 64. And so the possible combinations of trigrams make these hexagrams, and so that's what constitutes an actual reading. And so if we were to do it more consciously, see, then the hexagrams, you know, look like that, for example, where you have a trigram above and you have a trigram below. And so the trigram above represents the external situation, and the lower one, of course, the internal situation. And so, so for example, if you were to do one for the United States at the moment, see, then you could say, well, what is the international relations, and what is the domestic relations on the inside of the country? And so you could actually try to go over to the senses, and you could try to say, okay, now which one of these would represent the international relations, and which one of these represents the domestic relationships inside the country. And so you can do that with a situation like this evening, or you can do that with, you know, I can do that with my relationship, or with you know, anything that is of interest to me, to try to inquire into those interactions. And then the hexagram itself makes a reading based on the interaction between those 2 trigrams. And so so then there's a book, you know, they're for sale in the lobby. The book would have a text, right, that would you would then read that and kind of go, okay, that's what the hexagram means.
Why don't you give an example? Just ask for a question or something.
Yeah, about one. What do you got?
I have fire over water.
Fire over water? As an example? No.
No, but
In answer to Amy's question.
in answer to Amy's question.
That's what I came up with.
So, so explain why.
Yeah.
Loudly.
Yeah.
So Amy had asked if William could,
I'll get the class.
yeah, like what is the moment?
Right.
And there may be many answers to that question in this room, in each of you. My own, as I thought about it, is fire over water, in that the external situation is a lesson, a sharing of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding, fire. Whereas the inner experience from right here, from where I'm sitting, is of kind of delving into, like, we're learning about a mystery. This is a mystery school. And so it's about settling into that mysterious quality, that unknown that is opened up through the study of the Ching. So,
Okay.
for example.
Randy, we have a book someplace back there? Just by coincidence? Um, Any artists here, close your eyes.
You've seen this before? You've seen that before?
I saw it once, I saw it on the bookshelf. I thought it was very nice. So in carpentry, they always say, you know, measure twice, cut once. I always try to check my charts before I name it. So, fire over water is called resolving paradox. And because you have fire sitting on top of water. And so as an image, that doesn't sit well. You know, try to explain fire on top of water. And so, and yet there it is. So in terms of psychology, they have what's called cognitive dissonance. You have two thoughts at the same time that can't resolve each other. They're conflicting thoughts. And so it's a paradox. Likewise, even though we weren't talking about the country especially, we could say that that the polarity within the country is such that there doesn't seem to be a resolution easily. There's a lot of two different worldviews, or at least two different worldviews that just that collide, that simply do not resolve into harmony. And so this one is about resolving paradox. And Michael, you have a great voice. You want to read a little bit of that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you want me to start with the image? So people,
Please.
so this is the image. There's if you haven't seen this book, there's a picture on one side and then text, a couple of pages. So this is an image of two intertwining serpents.
Talk louder, Michael.
Two intertwining serpents, one of water and one of fire, unite. Their tails braid into a rope that forms the umbilical cord of a gestating infant. From their union there also comes a bifurcated tongue that forms a single speech glyph representing a flower and song of jade. And then, what do you want to read the whole interpretation? Or?
Just the interpretation, please.
Okay. This hexagram depicts the creative power that is released by the marriage of opposites. The intertwining serpents symbolize the duality of the two great creative forces of the universe, whose union forms the mystery that is the core of every individual creation. The tail symbolizes that which follows or results from something. The rope symbolizes that which ties together or which provides continuity. The umbilical cord symbolizes hidden nourishment or an invisible wellspring. The gestating infant symbolizes both the impending birth of something new and the loving care it requires if it is to develop fully. Taken together, these symbols mean that you protect a new creation whose connection with the unseen forces provides continuity between the past and the future. The bifurcated tongue symbolizes that which appears to be two, but is in reality one. The single speech glyph of a jade flower and song symbolizes the single voice of philosophy, art, wisdom, and compassion with which the great duality speaks. Taken together, they mean that your thoughts, words, and actions increasingly give expression to the bittersweet experience of being born into a perfect world which you must inevitably leave.
Thank you. We got the other book is coming around.
This just means you have to come back next year.
And it's coming around this way also for you to see, but just so you kind of get a preview of it. So that's what Michael was reading. These are two great serpents. These are both the serpents of the plume serpent of Quetzalcoatl that we talked about earlier, that is divine intelligence. They're beautiful. The serpents are beautiful. They're not scary serpents. One is fire and one is water. And they share the same tongue, the bifurcated tongue. And so it is that duality that is one. The universal duality making up the unity, the unitary nature of the world. Most of our preventable difficulties in life arise from a failure to integrate our own personal halves with their universal counterparts, symbolized by fire and water. These are the two halves that I have inside of me, not just out there in the universe. Harmonizing with the duality that actually exists. And it isn't that hard to see, it isn't that hard to find, because it's all around us. On the one hand, it's creation, and on the other hand, it's destruction. We, as human beings, we don't like to talk about destruction, and yet we're doing it constantly. How to end things in a positive way. How to bring our destructive natures into harmony with the destructive nature of nature, which does destroy things, including me. I try not to take it personally, but here it is. It's going to erase this wonderful reward body that I was given. How to bring that into harmony, how to bring that knowledge into harmony. There's people who say, oh, the world is going to end, and it always makes me feel like they'd rather the world would end than know that it went on without them. So
Do you have coins here?
I might have coins here.
Yeah, I'm just curious if anyone wants to toss them and see where they get.
I'm not sure where we are time-wise. I don't want
Oh, I
to run over the legal limit of people's patience.
Just to show people.
I'm not share it a little bit. Just pass it down. We'll just do it that way. Pass it down. Just so you kind of see what they look like. These,
No, I wanted to.
I know, but I'm trying to find out from. You start at the bottom and you go up because it's an organic thing. 5 more times, please. Can you read them?
Yeah, too young.
Too young. Okay.
Somebody's got to do the math for me. 3, 6, 7, 8, thank you.
That would be an 8.
Okay, thanks.
8, 8. 3, 3, 2. Again, an 8. 3 more. please.
Did you say 3, 2, 2?
No, no.
It's 3, 2,
Yeah,
2.
yeah, 3, it's another 8.
3, 2, 2.
Okay, a 6. 3, 3, yeah. 2, 2, 2.
Two yin, 1 yang. 7.
Okay.
We're getting lots of options,
yang.
yes, it's great.
7. And 1 more, please.
Eight.
Eight.
Just a lot faster than
3,
using
3, 2.
sticks. So that's a lot faster than using sticks. I'm just, sticks.
There, serve you right.
Thanks.
So, in essence, there's only 2 kinds of lines, a solid line and a broken line. But if you get so the 2 and 1, which would be a 7 or an 8, then those are kind of in balance. But if you get 3 yin, which would be a 6, or if you got 3 yang, which would be a 9, there it's thought that those represent a state of tension or transition points, and they flip into their opposite. And so, okay. Oh, well done. Nicely done. Okay, I got it. Shorthand. Okay, so, what Megan means is that that this line changes into its opposite, and the others do not, because they're all in a state of balance. And so this one would remain the same, which is moon. This one was water and changing to
Wait.
changing to lake. And so water over lake is hexagram 61.
Water over there.
I'm sorry.
Wait,
water over moon, his head runneth away. It's hexagram 61, and that's called strengthening integrity. And so, our Linda's question was, well, why are we, what would we come for tonight or something? And so this represents strengthening integrity, and that shows two people who appear to be very resourceful and strong and wise. Sitting on the floor doing divination.
Well done, Linda.
So, that's hardly a coincidence.
Not a coincidence.
Facing each other during divination. So, this hexagram depicts the way for allies to strengthen their spirit in one another. Now, taken together, these symbols mean that you align yourself with others in order to transform your weaknesses into strengths. So, it's the short version. And when we look at a lake over moon, and that is hexagram 19. And, and that's called celebrating passage. And that represents four feminine figures, from a little girl to an adolescent to a young woman to a mature woman to an elder, dancing on the beach. With one another in a nice circle of joy. Beneath the four phases of the moon. Okay?
You're doing great.
Thank you.
So that means the changing line means that from the first intention, it turned into this,
Right, thank you.
which means.
Why don't you come up here and you do this? Yes, that the changing line then represents a point of transition where the external situation changes from mystery into joy. And what it involves is, because this is in the fourth line, and so in terms of, remember it goes from the bottom up, and so psychologically this is infant, child, adolescent, first adulthood, mature adulthood, and elder. In terms of issues, that would be vulnerability and dependence, trust and bonding, attachment. This would be alienation and separation as the adolescent. This would be independence and freedom, but also responsibility as the young adult. The full adulthood would represent empowerment or authority, self-empowerment. And then the elder would represent disengagement, as the sage kind of thing. And so this changing from yin to yang, just the fourth one, would mean that this act of independence is less conscious and is becoming more conscious. With this line, this would be more conscious, this would be less conscious. And so that tension is, in theory, it means that here we were all strengthening one another and engaging in wonderful nurturing activity with one another, and we become aware of our own independent spirit and our own self-sufficiency in
And so
the
everyone
world.
goes and buys a book
And
and then takes it away with them.
and that,
Starts doing their own readings, right?
erase that. And that transition of self-sufficiency, inner sense of freedom and spontaneity and independence, knowing that we have the freedom but also the responsibility to ourselves to break up all conceptual barriers and to, and as the reading was saying, to become ourself, based on ourself, not based on anything else. Our true path is not one that can be defined by anything or anyone. And that is that act of celebrating passage. And we see that we're actually jointly and individually able to create a kind of movement into another phase, another step on the journey. And nothing would make me happier personally to know that our getting together played some small part in that. Okay. And so that's an example of a divination, a particularly nice one, because you don't actually get a picture that shows two people sitting there doing divination as part of the reading, so okay, so if there are any questions, actual questions, or unactual questions, pretend questions, now's your chance.
I want to know about the moon and one's own self.
Say again?
I want to know about the moon and one's own self to completion. That's my not real question.
It's an unreal question.
Say it once more, Andrew.
I want to know about the moon and coming to completion and completing ourselves, coming to our own self. That's what I'm saying.
And why that's the moon? That's what you're asking?
Yeah,
I
I've
see.
been curious about that. Last while, and then we drew it out.
Right, well, one way to think about it is that the full moon represents the full realization of our potential. And the new moon represents the emptiness of whatever it is that we should empty. So on the one hand, self-defeating habits. The emptiness of self-defeating habits, that would be a good thing. But also emptiness of compulsive thoughts. And so that the moon represents, in Taoist thought, enlightenment is always the full moon. You know, it's always the symbol. And if you look at the full moon, you'll see that between the shadow and the light, you can actually see there is like a yin-yang symbol on the full moon. And that's interesting because that means they didn't design the yin-yang symbol. They just copied it from the full moon. And that represents enlightenment. The idea there is that the moon doesn't radiate light. It takes the light of the source and it reflects it back. And that's our own perfecting nature. That's our own completing nature, is that we are taking the light of source, divine light, and we are managing to reflect it. And but in terms of completion as the fruit, then it completes the seed, but it also contains the seed for the next generation of growth. So the idea of completion is not one of an end, permanent end. It's one of constant transformation, revelation, perfecting activity. Okay.
Thanks. Got it.
I think this is kind of a silly question.
Of course.
When I first was taught to do the Ching, I was taught to use stalks, which is like a lot of counting and everything. It
Right.
seems a lot easier. Is there like any difference? I always kind of thought, oh, using coins is kind of like cheating because it's just quicker.
Right.
And you gotta sit there and count all the stalks and do all
Well,
that.
right, I had the same question at the beginning. And so my teacher pushed me in the direction of looking at what some mathematicians were doing with that. And they figured out that there was not the randomness in the stalk counting. And that the randomness actually lay in with the coins. And that, it's been 50 years now, I can't remember the exact reason, but the counting thing and the piles, that when you're making the pile, it leans towards one or the other outcome instead of the very simple 6, 7, 8, 9.
So there's more randomness in the
The
coins.
more randomness in the coins.
So not cheating. But
No,
your coin,
no,
okay.
no. Oh, no, the coins were used all across China
Okay.
for a long time. Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool, thank you.
No, it's a great question.
That makes sense.
Technical question. but
Because I
you're-
was thinking like, oh, when you're doing the counting, there's sort of its own meditation and intent and presence, because it
Right.
requires a sort of, it's more time consuming.
Right, but if you actually say, that's my intent, then you set up a candle, you set up a piece of silk, you go into meditation, you can take 5 or 10 minutes between dropping the coins.
Right.
And there's absolutely no reason to feel rushed.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
sure.
I have a question.
No,
It's not really a question, I guess it's a, when you ask a question, like today, if I'm asking a question about my future,
right,
like my life's purpose, but I'm asking it today,
right,
and I throw the coins and you do a reading for me,
right.
it's a totally different answer than in 10 years if I ask, right? Because it's actually the moment that I'm asking is the place where the intention is.
Right. Right.
Or does it have a lifespan of,
No,
6
right,
months or
even if, I mean, a lot of people say, well, I didn't like that answer, so I threw them again, and I got a different answer. And again, my teacher would say, things changed from the first answer, because it's trying to make you aware of something. And that has already changed the situation. But many people will find that they're getting the same hexagram or they're getting the same trigrams in a certain place over and over again in a certain period of their life. But, very quickly, I had a woman who sat down once and for a reading, and he said, well, what are we doing? And she said, well, I work in a hospice, and then I go home at night, and my husband is dying of 2 different kinds of cancer, and I'm taking care of him, and my life sucks. Okie dokie. So we throw the coins, and it comes up entering service. She stands up, this is a bunch of crap, and she stalks off. That's the best reading I ever did. doesn't have anything to do with me. It's like, the Oracle wanted her to hear that, to remind her that that's what you're doing. That's what this life is about, at least now. Have some joy, have some humility, have some dedication to the decisions that you've made. And play the cards you're dealt with dignity.
Can I answer Amy too?
Of course.
So, my name is Linda Ruth and I'm an astrologer, and William and I have been working together for over 10 years, but I would do a reading for someone which would take 2 hours, at the end of which I'd say, do you want to throw the Ching? And they'd throw the coins, and in 5 minutes, it summarized the whole reading. And that happens so many times. So, in terms of, Amy, your timeliness of it, you know, I would be talking about transits, which means where the stars in the sky are in relationship to your chart, and talk and blah, 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 and then throw the coins and it would give the synopsis of the whole reading. Right? So that was the moment of now. That's what I'm saying.
But I do think also, if I have a dream, and I go, oh, I know exactly what that dream means, and then 2 years later, I've got a completely different interpretation, and it's the same dream. And so that's the thing about symbols, and it's the thing about.
Well, and what I'm saying is, you wouldn't have the same transits 2
Right.
years later either, right?
True.
So.
There would be one last small point, and this is for those of you that, let's say, believe in magic. Let's put it that way. These are the trigrams that we talked about represent senses in the sense of connecting with the world in receiving. But they also represent intentions that I can channel that same force, let us say, that same intent with my intent. And so sun is creation. And so I focus my intent on that in order for manifestation. I am attempting to manifest things in my life or in the world or something. And the same with joy, the same with knowledge, the same with surprise, the same with patient adaptation, the same thing with mystery, the same with standstill, the same with completion. That each one of these represents an intention that enters into the intentional field of manifestation, that is this whole big, wonderful thing that's going on. And that it is able to perhaps minutely influence things in a positive way. And of course the rule of thumb is benefit all at the same time. People talk about Wu Wei as action without action or something like that. See, but the better definition is selfless action. This means I'm not striving for anything personally. It's just selfless action is Wu Wei. If you delve into the Taoism at all, you'll run up against Wu Wei immediately. And so the best, again, Hinton calls it selfless action. I like that. Cleary calls it action without striving. But the idea being that I identify more with the whole and less with just my own personal gain and loss. Benefiting the whole to the extent that I have the inner resources to do so. Okey-dokey.
William, one more.
Of course, yes.
So, given that we have a book at home, would you use just 3 coins and ask the coins to show you which is yin or yang, or how do you, for those of us who don't have?
Well, actually, in the book, there's, right behind the introduction, there's a section on how to do it.
Okay,
Heads and tails.
But,
yeah.
if you're using just pennies,
Mhm.
then heads is yang, is 3, and tails is 2. Always. Okay, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just offer a shameless plug?
Maybe.
So if y'all have enjoyed spending time with William and listening to his voice and wise words, and he's about to go back to Mexico for some months, there's a podcast. It's called Living in a Time of Dying podcast. And there are 3 lovely episodes with William that you can listen to. And we're not talking about the I Ching, but it's good stuff. There's also a lovely episode with Juan sitting over there, so check it out. You can listen to them over and over and feel like you're sitting here with William.
Megan and I wrote a book together called Living in a Time of Dying, and Cries of,
Grief, rage, love, and hope.
again,
You know, some of those emotions
Say that
that we
again,
feel.
Megan.
Cries of
Cries of grief, rage, love, and hope.
Living in a Time of Dying. And so that just came out last year, whatever. At any rate, so she has a great podcast, and she asks really great questions. And lets me talk, so I love her.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Time for popcorn.
Popcorn, cookies.
You have some books,
Cookies.
which I think we're doing